and I will get started. All right. Thanks so much for being with us today for our February Business Bites. Every second Wednesday of the month, we may change the date, but for right now, it's every second Wednesday of the month at noon. We do 30 minutes on a different topic of interest to Eastern Washington small businesses and nonprofits. Everything last month was federal tax prep. We've done business licensing. We've done SEO and marketing. Fill in the blank. We've been doing them for a little over a year now, a year and a half. And you're always free to attend. We will email you the slides afterwards. The slides have live links in them. So you don't have to write down websites or anything. You can take the notes you need, but no, we're going to give you the content afterwards. And then we'll also post this on our YouTube channel, which is YouTube/Spokane Independent, where we have about 30 different workshops, not just our business bites on there as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start the presentation. And we have a lot of people, so I'm going to try to do questions at the end, just so we can get going. So I'm going to start my presentation. The other thing I'm going to mention is SIMBA's consultations, depending on topic, are $25. Sometimes they are free. But for folks who attend our workshops, whether it's our business bites workshops that are on Zoom or any of our in-person workshops, I know we have one coming up about tech for small businesses. That's coming up in March. We always give away a handful of consultations. So if you would like to be considered to receive a free consultation, please put your email in the chat. And at the end, we will select a couple of folks to receive free consultations on not just fiscal sponsorship, any topic you like. So today we're covering fiscal sponsorships for nonprofits. Again, we have 30 minutes. I've got 15 minutes worth of slides to talk about, maybe a little less, and then happy to take questions for fiscal sponsorship specifically. If you have questions about it or want to pursue it with SIMBA, that is not a paid consultation. That's a free consultation. So we'll tell you at the end how to go beyond this with us. Oops. So I always have to move this around, my little viewer thing. So who's SIMBA? We're the Spokane Independent Metro Business Alliance. So part of the reason we use SIMBA is because it's easier, but also we were founded in Spokane, but we actually work in about 13 to 15 Eastern Washington counties. So it's a little easier to say SIMBA and not just Spokane Independent. We support entrepreneurs, small businesses, and nonprofits, and our focus is local first. So independent and local and things that align with supporting small businesses in our region is where we focus our work. Our goal is education first and advocacy for small businesses. So we are a C3, we're not a C6, which is just a business association. There are all kinds of those around. So networking is not our primary focus, which is what the primary focus of a C6 would be, which is why we run workshops, offer consultations, and other kinds of services to support small businesses. We do free monthly workshops. Usually there's at least two. There's always a Zoom one. There's usually at least one or two in-person ones. We have an on-demand resource library that's on YouTube with videos and workshops. I think there's about 30 now. We run Live Local INW, which is a free directory marketplace for Eastern Washington small businesses and nonprofits. It's free to join. All you have to do is receive our newsletter. You don't even have to read it, although you should. You can list your business, your services, post your events. We last month had 25,000 people visit the website on Live Local. So it's a great way to get some exposure for your business, to create a landing page, to let a different audience who hasn't found you find your information. And the events page is not just a calendar. You can link your Eventbrite, ticketing links. You can link back to your website. You can add photos. So it's a little more robust than just, here's a Google Calendar. We offer low cost or free business consultations depending on the topic, and a few other services as well. But today we're going to talk about fiscal sponsorship, which is a service we offer. So what is fiscal sponsorship? Generally, it's a formal arrangement. There's always going to be a contract between an existing C3, who's called the sponsor or the sponsoring entity. There's a few other names, the fiscal sponsor. And the fiscal sponsor provides various kinds of support and basically holds out their tax exempt status to mission aligned organizations, projects, or groups. And that's the sponsored project or the sponsee. So for folks in the room, if you were to partner with SIMBA in fiscal sponsorship, you would be the sponsored project. SIMBA would be the sponsor. Fiscal sponsorship allows emerging nonprofits, folks who don't have their own C3 status yet or don't have the infrastructure to manage grants and contracts, that don't have their own tax exempt status, or they're not a C3. Because C6s can accept tax deductible donations, for example. C4s, it's very hard for them to apply for grants. Sometimes existing nonprofits with other statuses will also partner with the fiscal sponsor. And we also offer fiscal sponsorship for values-aligned for-profit entities to receive grant funding and collect donations. So for us, that always looks like independent businesses. Last year, we partnered with a couple of for-profits in an art space to get some grant funding for some artwork in our community and like collective art spaces. So it was all performance art based for us in the last year, but that's kind of what the values alignment looks like for profit fiscal sponsorship. There are all kinds of fiscal sponsors, local and national. They all are going to do things slightly differently, and they all offer a different set of services. I'm going to link at the end to, there's like a membership for fiscally sponsored organizations. We are not currently a member, although I think maybe we should be. That lists all kinds of different fiscal sponsorships. Fiscal sponsors all have some different kind of mission and some different set of things they're going to do for you. Some of them are very broad, everything to writing grant applications for you, to managing your federal contracts, to literally being your accountant. Some folks do basically just allow you to use the C3 status to take donations and you do everything else. SIMBA's kind of in the middle of those and have some additional add-ons. So if you're looking for a fiscal sponsor, whether it's SIMBA or somebody else, it's really important that you look for a sponsor that does what you need at a rate that you're willing to pay for. There are a few entities that do a little bit of free fiscal sponsorship. Smith Barbieri Foundation locally that has, almost $1 billion with a B, does some limited fiscal sponsorship where they don't charge a fee, but they also, again, have massive amounts of money. And for them, it's only a couple of small, like BIPOC-led projects where they are trying to get them off the ground to become their own standalone. Last I heard, they're not accepting new fiscally sponsored projects, but they can. There's national organizations that do it. You can expect that entities that aren't going to charge you are going to be incredibly rare and very selective. But you also should know that some of the bigger national organizations that do it are going to charge you upwards of 25%, which we'll talk about in a minute. But generally, what is it? It's a formal agreement. There's going to be a contract. It may be for a set term. Like we're going to be in a fiscal sponsor relationship for a year. It could be ongoing until the parties cancel. It could be we're in a fiscal sponsorship arrangement until you get your own C3 status. That's always going to vary. For SIMBA, it's generally for a year, but we can renew that. We have some where we're the fiscal sponsor for a specific contract, and that contract lasts longer than a year. So we draft the contract for that. We're flexible on that. Other folks are going to set the terms on what that looks like. It can include use of the sponsor's C3 status for grant applications. I think the number one question we get at SIMBA from for-profits is there grant funding? I will tell you that grant funding is exceedingly rare for for-profit businesses, unless you're in a research or technology space. Or if you're in, right now, there's a lot of funding around like addiction recovery counseling, for example. But generally, unless you're a C3, you're not going to be eligible for any kinds of grants. Not every grant allows people to use a fiscal sponsor. Some grants do, some grants don't. They're going to tell you, but having a fiscal sponsorship opens that up for you, especially if you're just starting a nonprofit. I know some of you in the room are just starting a nonprofit or considering starting a nonprofit due to cuts in staff at the IRS that you've probably all heard about. The processing of a C3 application can take 12 months or more at this point. So during that time period, you can't receive tax deductible donations, you can't apply for grants. So that's generally what we see when people are looking for a fiscal sponsor. It often includes accounting services, could be for the grant or project, could be more full service, depends on what the fiscal sponsor is offering. Can include financial management, which is more than just accounting. That can be things like budgeting, how to create budgets for grants, how to track projects to grants, a little more broad than just accounting, providing policies and samples. It can provide capacity building, which looks like figuring out how to apply for grants, adopting bylaws for your board, getting yourself in a position where you're ready to receive donations, messaging around that, grant and contract oversight, because importantly, especially for the folks who haven't applied for grants in the room, grants almost always have reporting requirements. Sometimes those reporting requirements are significant and you're generally not getting paid to do those reports. And they often also have very strict guidelines on what you can spend the funding for and what you can't. Sometimes there is audits of the grant. So grant and contract oversight is something that's often a part of fiscal sponsorship, because importantly, when you apply for a grant or contract with the fiscal sponsor, the person who's ultimately responsible is the fiscal sponsor. So they're going to want to make sure you're doing that right. Other services are often available as agreed by the parties, depending on the situation. And really important is the ability for the fiscally sponsored project, so your emerging nonprofit, to solicit tax deductible donations. Because until you have C3 status, you can't offer people tax deductible donations. Yes, people can still donate to you, they just can't write those off. And a lot of folks, especially like local sponsors, thinking about local businesses who might want a tax write-off, some of the banks who donate to certain things, they're willing to give more if there's a tax deduction available. So that's a really important part of fiscal sponsorship. So why would you have one? Again, you can't apply for grants or a lot of community sponsorships. So a lot of our like credit union sponsorships. So for example, Numerica will only sponsor events if you're a nonprofit. If you don't have a C3 status, and that can take months or longer to apply for. And that's after you've done all these steps in advance to get there. It's also worthwhile to determine if there's community support or engagement for your project. Maybe you think, hey, I want to start a nonprofit doing trap neuter release for local cat populations, stray cat populations. But you don't know if people are going to fund that because there's a lot of other organizations doing animal rescue in town. So you want to see if your project is something that the community wants to fund, because having community engagement for your nonprofit is going to be really important. You maybe lack capacity to process donations. You don't have a bank account yet because you haven't gotten started. You don't have a payment processing system. You don't want to write out tax receipts. Even if you already are your own C3, maybe you don't have staffing that can get that done. You're all volunteers. You might want a fiscal sponsor for that. You don't have established accounting procedures, which are important for tax purposes. And you don't have a nonprofit status, like I mentioned, that doesn't allow for tax deductible donations. So a C6, for example, a business association, people can donate to them, but they can't be tax deductible because most of the revenue is through memberships only. And so that is something that maybe you want to get donations for a project. So what to expect from emerging nonprofits in a fiscal sponsor relationship. Generally, broad overview of everybody, and then we'll talk about kind of what SIMBA does. So you're going to get a formal contract. You're going to outline the parties' obligations to each other. Pretty standard. Definitely read it. I mean, that goes for any contract. Read it before you sign it. But there's going to be a contract outlining what that looks like. One critical part of the contract, whether you're working with SIMBA or you're working with somebody else for fiscal sponsorship, is to find out what the payment terms are. So when SIMBA started, we didn't have our own C3 status. Like nobody starts generally with one. We had a fiscal sponsor from a national organization, the American Independent Business Alliance. Their national group focus on shopping and supporting local. If you follow SIMBA's social media, you may see us sharing some of their materials. Um, they had, as part of their contract, they would receive donations and or grants or contracts. So they received some grant money for us, and they would take their fee and send us that, but they would only send them out once a month via check. And it's kind of wild to get some of those checks in the mail. I always think it's a little sketch. Wouldn't do an ACH or a wire or anything like that. And it was only once a month. So if you're depending on that funding to operate, you need to know what that process is. So always look at that piece. Processing fees are going to vary by sponsorship type or payment type. For SIMBA, it's a payment type issue. Fees are up to 25%. So if you get a grant for $1,000 and your sponsor, SIMBA doesn't charge 25, but if that sponsor charges 25, you're going to lose $250. So you only have $750 to do your project. So you need to know what that looks like up front. Fiscal sponsors are going to potentially put limits on what kinds of grants you can apply for, because again, they're putting their name out there, could jeopardize their future grant funding. And so they can be particular about that. And then other services as agreed upon by the parties. We talked about all those kinds of things. Some folks offer separate things and go from there. So from SIMBA, it looks like a contract after we determine that you're a values fit. And for us, that means you adhere to our mission, vision, values. We send you a link to them. I think most of you in the room I know or have met, so I know you're all values aligned already. But we get outreach from some folks. We only do this for businesses and nonprofits in Washington currently as well. I didn't list that on here. You are all in the Spokane area in the room, but we only do it for folks in Washington. We try to only focus on Eastern Washington. It just makes our lives and work a little easier. We provide you a monthly accounting for donations and grants, and also custom ticket links. We'll talk about one of our projects in a little bit here. So every month you get a spreadsheet that outlines, all the donations, grants, income you received, who you received it from. We give you email addresses and mailing addresses so you can reach out to those folks. We let people check a box when they're doing that, if they want us to provide that or if they want to be anonymous. And then we show fees, we show every time a payment is made to you, all of that good stuff. You get those once a month. You can get them at any time as well, but we send them out to you once a month. We notify you when you receive payments. You just don't get the accounting, the daily. We also create custom payment links for you for donations, including QR codes, embedded codes for websites, links you can drop in an email. So if you're hosting an event, you can put your table tent out with your QR codes. I feel like the QR code is the thing that came out of the pandemic stronger than anything else, because they existed and then they went away and now they're just everywhere. But we'll create that so that we collect information automatically. People can pay in any way they want, and we can put whatever language you want in there or that payment link as well. We can also create custom ticketing links, and I don't think I mentioned that in here. One of our fiscally sponsored projects that some of you may have attended last fall was Spokane Soup. They don't have an entity of their own yet, and they needed a way to do that. So all of the ticketing for that event also went through SIMBA. So we could give them customer lists and for check-in at that physical event. So that is something we can also create as part of our fiscal sponsorship. We do ACH payments. We don't do checks. Made at least monthly to your organization. I say at least monthly because it depends on how much money has come in. We're not going to ACH you multiple times a month. You get $5 here, $25 there. But for example, one of our fiscally sponsored projects is called the Finding Common Ground Initiative, which is working on making sure that hospital systems stay in rural communities. And so they're getting very large donations because people really care about that. They're doing community outreach and town halls and buying billboards and educating people and trying to bring people with different political views together. And so they don't get paid just once a month because they're getting, donations of $2,500 at a time or more. And so we ACH that once it clears our bank account. Fees are going to range between 3% and 8%. It's going to vary by contract. We'll talk about the requirements for fiscal sponsorship and why those fees may rate. The 8% on the higher end, and this is for emerging nonprofits, is for those custom payment links, because SIMBA is also paying merchant processing fees on that through our system. So that one is a little higher. Um, we do require you to become a nonprofit member. This is for emerging nonprofits of SIMBA, which is $75 for the year, or pay a one-time annual fee of $50, which allows us to draft contracts and create all those codes. And that, as a member, you get extra services like consultations, marketing, social kinds of things. We do all of the donor receipts, both for electronic donations and um, other donations, checks, ACH, cash. So we do all the donor receipts for you. You don't have to do any of that. We can provide contract management and capacity building support as a paid add-on service or as part of your membership. You can use your consultations for that. We issue all the 1099s for everyone who's made donations or sponsorships or other kinds of payments to your organization. So you also don't have to do that. And the other thing a lot of folks, I think, don't know is that nonprofits in Washington pay state taxes. We pay business and operation taxes. Nonprofits that run things like thrift stores pay retail sales tax. There are tax obligations on all kinds of grants and contracts. So we actually pay and record those tax obligations as part of the entity receiving that money. You are still going to potentially pay state taxes on the portions you receive, but we are paying on the full amount, even though we're not receiving that full amount. So it's lessening the burden on your tax reporting as well. For grants in the state of Washington for B&O tax, which is business and occupancy tax that all businesses pay. If the grant is purely for general operations or more like a donation, there's no tax on it. But if you have to provide any services or a project for the grant, you also pay tax on it. So that is a kind of a significant thing in Washington. What fiscal sponsorship is not is SIMBA giving money to your organization. This is not a bank sponsorship or a community sponsorship. If we had money to give out like that, we'd be a foundation and not a C3. So it is not an application you fill out where we sponsor your event. It is also not finding grants for you to apply to. Membership does offer some grant searches depending on the kind of level, and we also offer low-cost grant searches as well using aggregator software. We can't guarantee there's grants available, but we have several platforms that cost us, a couple $1,000s a year to run, and so we will run some searches to see what might be available to you or let you know. But it's not us finding grants for you. It's definitely not us writing grants for you. You can use membership consultations if you are a member to have us review grants for you. We're happy to do that. Other nonprofit capacity advice and contract advice is not part of what we do for our fiscal sponsorship. But again, you can do it through your consultations or for a small fee. Like a paid consultation for SIMBA is $25 for an hour. Paid consultation for a business consultant in Spokane is going to run you about $250, $275. For-profit businesses, it works basically the same, except we're a bit more selective. And it's quite frankly because there's less restrictions on for-profits, and it's a little riskier for us as a nonprofit to put our C3 status out. In large part, one of the things that is required for us to keep our C3 status is to not do any legislative activity or lobbying. If you follow our social media, we weigh in about issues that impact the businesses we serve, and we can talk about legislation or how a tariff might impact your business and how to reach out to a legislator. But that is not the same as saying this is the candidate we support. So that's really important for us to be there. So for-profit businesses, you have to be a values-aligned business. You have to be able to be a member. So you have to be in Eastern Washington. And generally, we want you to have a grant identified already for application purposes. Fees are 5 to 10%, depending on payment type. Again, the higher end is those automated payments, but most grants or contracts pay through ACH, so that's on the low end of 5%. We don't do fiscal sponsorship for government contracts for profit entities. Again, those are really strict, and generally it's not allowed anyway. We will do it for nonprofits. Again, just a lot of extra security steps there, because it is a little riskier, because quite frankly, if we entered into a fiscal sponsorship contract with someone, and this is true of any fiscal sponsor, and they didn't meet their end of the bargain, SIMBA could get a termination letter for the grant because they're the ultimately responsible party. which we would have to report on all of our future grant and contract applications for a certain time period, which could impact our future funding. So that's why it's a little stricter. Every fiscal sponsor is going to have rules around that and what that looks like. Some don't let you apply to certain entities at all. Some do it and the fees are higher. So you're really going to want to investigate what that looks like. Some resources, link to our website that I think I've sent almost all of you to at some time or another. There are some Q&As on there or some FAQs. I don't remember how we titled it that let you know what that is. I will click here. These are our current fiscally sponsored projects. Most of them are emerging nonprofits. Some of them are arts spaces. So if you are a fiscally sponsored project of ours as well, we put you on our website. We link to your website and we allow people to donate directly to you on our website as well. So those are our current projects. We have a couple of other ones that are on pause. So those are what that is. The Council of Nonprofits, it's a national org. It's just like Board Source or the Nonprofit Association of Washington. There's all kinds of resources like that. They have a really good guide to fiscal sponsorship. And again, I'm going to send these slides out to everybody in the next couple of days. And so just kind of gives you a little more overview and understanding because I know this was really basic. And then the National Network of Fiscal Sponsors is that member-based entity that I mentioned that basically has a list of like 50 different entities that are fiscal sponsors and what they offer and allows you to find things that might fit what you're doing. I'm going to stop sharing and pop back into the Zoom for questions. And I'm going to repeat really quickly before there are any questions. If you're interested in a free consultation besides talking to one of us about fiscal sponsorship, because we give a few away at each of our workshops, put your email in the chat and then we will reach out to you about how to redeem those. Eva, I don't know how to pronounce your name exactly how you prefer. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, Robin. Finally, nice to meet you.
Yes, absolutely.
My question is really easy. You helped to the process, to the transition to create the nonprofit.
Yeah, so that is part of, for emerging nonprofits, we ask you to become an emerging or a nonprofit member, and you can use your consultations towards that. Yes. And okay. We actually, Better Health Together, which is the nonprofit that I'm sure some of you have worked with, actually will sometimes give your organization funding through technical support to allow us to help you apply as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Any other questions? I know that was kind of a lot. Feel free to take yourself off mute or raise your hand. Or everyone is ready for lunch. Christina, yes.
I have a question. So I am part of a coalition, and several of us on the call are part of this coalition as well. And we started putting on an event and then kind of needed a nonprofit partner. One of our members has been our fiscal sponsor, but we're kind of in that space where we are starting to grow and talking about like, what does this look like moving forward? Because we don't want to create our own nonprofit. We're a coalition, but because of the event, we do need the funding. And so would that be an opportunity for more of like a long-term fiscal sponsor for us to continue putting on these events and have someone to manage the money outside of our core group that's working on putting the event together and all those things?
That's a great question. So we do offer that. We have to have a conversation about it, of course. And so you may have seen when I went quickly to our website, the Bear Recovery Foundation. So that one is an entity that's not sure what they want to do yet. They're raising scholarship money for people to receive aftercare for addiction treatment. So after you go to like a rehab facility, there's counseling and all these other things that is usually not covered by insurance. And so they wanted a place to just collect money for the scholarship. So we're basically managing the scholarship funds for them because they don't know what they are yet and they don't know what they want to do. Same with Spokane Soup. They want to host these events. They don't want to be their own entity. So we are doing that for them. So yes, that is an option.
Awesome. Thank you.
Amazing. Any other questions? I will say if you are interested in having a meeting about fiscal sponsorship specifically and what that would look like for your organization, talk real numbers, you can set me an email. One of you just joined SIMBA right away. Thank you. Um, Send me an email. We will schedule a time to talk about your specific project, your specific needs. Because we're smaller, we can be a little more flexible. We are a little more picky for folks who are, like I said, a for-profit entity and are trying to make money because there's other ways to raise money than grants. But happy to work with you and connect. You can email me directly. It's Robin, ROBIN at SpokaneIndependent.org. Our emails are on our website as well, so you don't have to dig for them. I don't see any other questions in the room, so we will end our Zoom. We'll send out the slides. Our contact information is on there as well. We have some names in the chat. Those folks will reach out about a free consultation, which doesn't have to be about any of this. It could be about any topic you want to talk about. And then we will go from there. Thank you so much for spending your lunch with us. Bye, everyone.